in the depths of the temple of Apollo at Delphi, where the air smells of burnt incense, murmuring ancient voices, and the damp breath of prophetic earth, Cassius Varro heard his death sentence. It was not uttered by a judge. It did not come from an emperor. It came from the Pythia, the priestess with glazed eyes, trembling body, her voice split between the human and the divine, as she chewed laurel leaves and inhaled the toxic vapors rising from the sacred chasm in the marble floor. The son of Varro shall be consumed by Apollo's wrath, not by sword, not by famine, not by betrayal, but by a lightning bolt that comes not from the sky. Cassius, then 22 years old, stumbled out of the temple as if he had been punched in the stomach. The Delphi sun, usually golden and generous, now seemed like a hawk's eye watching him. Every shadow seemed to hide an omen, every distant thunder a warning. For months, he lived like a condemned man. He avoided storms. He slept far from tall trees. He refused to touch metal during the summer. He carried a silver amulet with the effigy of Minerva, goddess of wisdom and protector against sudden disasters. He consulted soothsayers, augurs, even an old priest of Isis who gave him a lapis lazuli talisman. But nothing saved him from the worst enemy, the fear of living. Because, as the days passed, Cassius realized it wasn't death that terrified him. It was living under the shadow of a divine curse. It was knowing that at any moment, Apollo, god of light, reason, prophecy, and also of plague and punishment, could decide his time was up, and not with glory, not with honor, but with silent humiliation, like an insect crushed under the finger of a bored god. Then he did something unexpected. He stopped running.
Cassius was no ordinary man. The son of Marcus Varro, a minor tribune who had served with distinction in the Britannia campaigns, he had grown up among the books of the family library and battle stories told by candlelight. Educated in rhetoric, philosophy, and astronomy, he spoke Greek fluently and quoted Homer as others quoted law. But unlike many patricians, he didn't see culture as an ornament. He saw it as armor. After hearing the prophecy, he abandoned Rome, not out of cowardice, but for healing. He traveled to Athens, where he studied under a disciple of Epictetus, learning Stoicism not as theory, but as the art of living under the inevitable. Then he went to Alexandria, where he spent months in the great library, reading treatises on oracles, curses, and the nature of divine will. It was there he discovered the most frightening truth of all. Apollo's prophecies never lie, but they rarely tell the whole truth. An oracle doesn't predict the future. It reveals a possibility, one thread among thousands, and human free will is the needle that decides which thread to follow. Armed with this knowledge, Cassius returned to the world, but not as before. Now he lived as if he were already dead.
15 years later, under the reign of the Emperor Hadrian, Cassius was an enigma in Rome. He lived in a modest villa at the foot of the Palatine Hill,
surrounded by olive trees and medicinal herb gardens. He had no wife, he had no children, but he was sought out by senators, generals, and even members of the imperial family, not for wealth, but for wisdom. They said he had predicted the fall of a corrupt praetor, that he had cured a consul's daughter of a fever the doctors called the punishment of the gods, that once he had faced a lion in the Circus Maximus, not with a sword, but with silence, and the beast, confused, had backed down. But the most surprising thing was his absence of fear. While others avoided speaking ill of Apollo, Cassius quoted the god in his speeches. While others fled from storms, he walked in the rain, arms outstretched as if challenging the heavens. While others feared sudden death, Cassius embraced it like an old friend. "Why do you not fear the lightning?" Antoninus asked him once on a banquet on the Palatine. Cassius smiled, pouring himself watered-down wine. "Because I have already died 1,000 times, my lord. The first was when I heard the prophecy. The second, when I realized that life is more frightening than death. The third, when I decided that living in fear is the true curse." Antoninus was silent. Then he said, "You are the freest man I have ever met." "I am not free. I am liberated. There is a difference."
But the gods do not forget. And Apollo, son of Zeus, brother of Artemis, god of Delphi and Didyma, does not tolerate a mortal mocking his prophecy with indifference. The opportunity arose during the Apolline Games, celebrated with pomp under the patronage of Hadrian himself. Cassius had been invited to give the opening blessing, a rare honor for a non-priest. On the morning of the event, the sky was clear, the sun shone with divine strength. The crowd filled the theater of Delphi, now rebuilt in white marble with statues of Apollo in every niche. Cassius walked onto the stage. He wore a simple tunic of white linen, no jewels, no insignia. His graying hair was short, his eyes calm as deep lakes. He began to speak. "Today we celebrate Apollo, not as the god of wrath, but as the god of clarity. He does not curse us, he reveals. And what he revealed to me years ago was not a sentence, but a mirror." The crowd fell silent. They said I would die by divine wrath, but the true wrath does not come from the sky. It comes from within. It is the wrath of fear, of insecurity, of the refusal to live fully. For years I feared the lightning until I realized that the lightning had already struck the moment I chose to live in fear. At that exact instant, the sky darkened. Not with ordinary clouds, with an impossible storm, black as Tartarus, with lightning that didn't illuminate but sucked the light. The wind howled like the Furies. The statues of Apollo seemed to come alive, their eyes fixed on Cassius. The crowd screamed, fled in panic, but Cassius did not move. He looked at the sky. He smiled. "Finally," he whispered, "you've come." A bolt of lightning descended, not from above, but from within the earth, as if the abyss itself had opened. The light was white, blinding, silent. When it struck Cassius, there was no explosion, no smoke, just a flash that blinded everyone for 3 seconds. When their vision returned, Cassius was on his knees, intact. But the ground around him was marked, not with soot, but with a symbol, the sacred tripod of Delphi, etched into the stone as if it had been there since the beginning of time. In the following days, the priests of Apollo panicked. They consulted the ancient scrolls. They interrogated the new Pythia. They offered sacrifices of 100 oxen. Nothing explained why the lightning had not killed Cassius, until an old priest, nearly blind, murmured, "Perhaps he was already dead." And it was true. Cassius had not died in the physical sense, but by choosing to live as if he had already lost everything, he had become untouchable. Divine wrath cannot strike one who has nothing left to lose. A curse cannot harm one who has already embraced his destiny. Apollo had not failed. The prophecy had been fulfilled, but not as everyone imagined. Cassius had died the day he heard the prophecy, and he was reborn the day he decided to truly live.
In the years that followed, Cassius became a living legend. He founded a school of philosophy on the outskirts of Rome, not to teach doctrines, but to teach courage. His students weren't just nobles, they were slaves, widows, disgraced soldiers, all looking for a way to live without fear. His motto, engraved at the school's entrance, was simple: "Die before you die, and live." When Hadrian offered him a place in the Senate, he refused. "My kingdom is not of marble and power. It is of free souls." When a gladiator, famous for his ferocity, came to challenge him, Cassius invited him to a banquet. At the end, the gladiator wept and asked to be his student. Even the gods seemed to respect him. There were never again storms in Delphi when Cassius visited. The statues of Apollo seemed to smile when he passed. And one night, a traveler swore he saw a golden eagle land on his shoulder and whisper in archaic Greek, "You challenged me with life, and you won." Cassius died at the age of 72, not by lightning, not by plague, not by betrayal. He died in his sleep, in his bed, with a book by Seneca open on his chest, and the sound of children reciting verses by Hesiod coming from the garden. His students buried him under an olive tree, with no headstone, no epitaph, but years later, a poet passed by and found an inscription carved into the tree's trunk, as if by invisible hands. The oracles said he would die by divine wrath. He died by choosing to live. And on full moon nights, the shepherds swear that if you stand under that olive tree and whisper your greatest fear, the wind answers with a question. What if you had already died from it? Because true freedom is not the absence of fear, it is the courage to live despite it. And Cassius Varro, the man cursed by Apollo, became the only mortal the gods could not touch, because he had already given his soul to the fire, and discovered that sometimes ashes are the only soil where true life can flourish.